Hello everyone, Boomer again with another video where I try to break down relatively complicated topics in an easy to understand way. Today I'll be going over a method of defeating the Ender Dragon referred to as one-cycling. It gets its name from the fact that the Ender Dragon is defeated in a single perch cycle, drastically reducing the amount of time spent in the end. The method I'll be going over involves exploding beds while leaving all the end crystals intact. Destroying the end crystals may actually increase the time it takes to defeat the dragon due to resetting its next behavior state. While the technique I'm about to discuss is used by speedrunners, any Minecraft enthusiast can benefit from this information. Before we start, I'd like to say thank you for all the support and encouragement I've received from you all. It really means a lot to me. Alright, let's jump into it. The first step to one-cycling the dragon begins with a good understanding of the end and some of the things you can do to control when and how the dragon perches. The platform you spawn on will always be located directly east of the dragon's perch point. The bedrock pillar extending upward from the end fountain is located at 0, 0. If we take a look at the end from a bird's eye view, we'll notice the east and west obsidian pillars are directly in line with 0, 0, while the north and south directions have a gap between them. There are many different strategies for setting up your one cycle. However, I'll only be discussing one primary method having two different variations. The variations we'll be looking at are north-south versus east-west perches and how we can force the dragon to perform one or the other. The Ender Dragon has four main states of behavior, the first of which is guarding. This is where the dragon flies around each obsidian pillar, weaving in and out. The second action is diving, and this is where she dives onto the target player's position, taken at the start of the dive. The third state is strafing, and this is when she shoots a fireball at the player. Note, the fireball itself does not cause damage to the player, rather, the dragon's breath that emanates from the explosion does. The fourth state is perching, and this is the one we need to take a closer look at. As mentioned previously, we would prefer to force the dragon to perch in a manner that's consistent with our one-cycle plan. Taking a look at this basic diagram, notice the directions of north, south, east, and west. If, after setting up our one-cycle blocks at the end fountain, more on that in a bit, we choose to head to the north and wait for the dragon to perch, the dragon should end up perching in a north-south manner, as shown here. Conversely, if we choose to wait either in the east or west for the dragon to perch, the dragon should perch in an east-west manner. Let's take a look at the way I like to do my setup for one-cycling. As I mentioned earlier, I'll only be showing you two variations of the same method. There are numerous different strategies that can be used, and by no means am I suggesting this is the best. The way I set up for my one-cycle looks like this. There are two important things to consider when doing this. First, the block located where you see the crying obsidian must be a block that won't be destroyed by a bed explosion. Typically, I'll end up using obsidian or crying obsidian. Second, the side you place the non-breakable block is directly related to the direction you want the dragon to perch. This particular setup will give you a good chance of getting a 4-bed one-cycle if you can get the rhythm and timing down. If you're setting up for an east-west perch, you'll be placing the non-breakable block on either the east or west side of the bedrock pillar. Likewise, if you're setting up for a north-south perch, you want to place the non-breakable block on the north or south side of the bedrock pillar. Here, I'll show you how to set up for an east-west dragon perch. I've just spawned in the end, which means I'm on the east side of the end island, heading west towards the end fountain. This part isn't pretty because I'm thrown off a bit by the level difference, but I make it work. Since we're going for an east-west perch, we want to place our unbreakable block on the east or west side of the fountain. The type of block used for the rest of the setup doesn't need to be anything special. Actually, in this case, I had enough crying obsidian to use for everything, but for some reason, I decided to use wood planks. After completing the setup, I need to find a good place to wait and watch for the dragon's perch. Since we want an east-west perch, our waiting place needs to be near either the east or west obsidian pillars. In this case, I head back east in the direction of the spawn platform and decide to pillar up for a better view of everything. I'm able to use a pearl to expedite my efforts, but I still need to tower up a bit more to be safe. The minimum ideal height to tower up is where y equals 123. This will prevent the dragon from being able to directly strike you with her wings or head, and provide you with a great view of the entire island, while limiting the chance of aggravating an Enderman. In this next example, I'm going to set up for a north-south perch. After leaving the spawn platform on the east side of the end island, I head west towards the end fountain. Since I'm aiming for a north-south perch, I need to place my unbreakable block on either the north or south side of the fountain, and then head off to my waiting area in either the north or south part of the island. Since the obsidian pillars on the north and south side of the island don't directly line up with the fountain, we're usually able to wait at ground level with an unimpeded line of sight, making towering up not necessary. Of course, you want to be mindful of Endermen and look out for fireballs and dragon's breath. Let's talk about the dragon's perch and how to determine when it's going to do so. Identifying when the dragon's about to perch is extremely important. The sooner you do so, the better chance you have of one cycling. Perches will look different depending on whether you're set up for north-south or east-west. This example was taken from the east-west setup we looked at a minute ago. It might be hard to see on the recording, but since I plan on waiting on top of the east obsidian pillar, I'm looking for the dragon to circle around the far west obsidian pillar and snap towards the fountain. Once you've seen the dragon perch from this angle a few hundred times, you'll be able to identify when it's on perch approach before it snaps. In this example, I recognize the perch well in advance. This next one is definitely hard to see, and I actually messed up and pearled in late the first 2 times the dragon perched. In fact, I wasn't even sure if this was an actual perch and just hoped it was. I'm not sure why it took me so long to figure out which side of the pillar to be on, but that didn't help matters either. I won't show it, but I ended up failing to one cycle and wasn't able to finish the dragon. And here's why. The height of the obsidian pillar opposite where you're waiting for the dragon to perch matters. This is the exact same end where I failed. Had I chose to do an east-west perch, most likely I would have had an easier go at it. Let's take a look at the height of the dragon when it begins the perch cycle related to the nearest pillar. Here, I'm forcing the dragon to perform an east-west perch, and the pillar opposite my location is relatively tall. Once the dragon begins to perch, it performs 6 switchbacks on its way down to the fountain. Moving over to roughly the same location I was waiting for the dragon to perch during my run, albeit hovering in mid-air for visual acuity, the number of switchbacks turns out to be 4. While the difference between 4 and 6 switchbacks is only a couple of seconds, it's an eternity when trying to position yourself for a one cycle. My advice to you is to take a look at the end and make an assessment as to whether an east-west or north-south perch is warranted, and, if given the choice, always wait on the side with the shortest pillars or pillar. This particular end had short pillars located at the north, south, and east areas, meaning my best option would be to wait in the east since the west pillar was relatively tall. As far as learning what a perch looks like and how to spot it early, nothing beats practice. I suggest you start a new world in creative, go directly to the end, and alternate your position such that the dragon is forced to perch east-west and north-south. As long as you're in creative and not spectator, the dragon will behave as if you're in survival, other than shooting fireballs at you, of course. Like I mentioned previously, perch approaches and dragon snaps look differently depending on whether or not you're forcing an east-west or north-south perch. There is no shortcut to learning the difference. In my experience, watching perches and perch approaches repetitively is the best method. Now that we know the basics of the end and the ender dragon, as well as how to identify a perch, let's take a look at an actual one cycle. I'm using Emma's Epic End Practice in this tutorial, and I recommend you do the same. I'll leave a link in the description. What we're about to see is a basic one cycle using 5 beds to kill the dragon. We'll take a look at this in more detail in just a minute, but pay attention to my rhythm as I use the number keys to select each bed and right-click to place and explode each time. I realize it happens quickly, so we'll slow it down afterwards. Let's take a look at this from a couple different angles and step through it frame by frame. I recorded this video at 60 frames per second, so the granularity of what we're about to review will be limited accordingly. The main portion of this video is my view as I'm attempting to one-cycle the dragon. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see an overhead view of the exact same footage. In the bottom right, I'm showing an active overlay of my mouse and keyboard. The first thing to be aware of is the hitbox associated with the Ender Dragon's head. This is the so-called sweet spot and identifies the exact area you'll want to target with each bed explosion. As you can see, the hitbox associated with the head is easily identifiable as it's the only box having a box within a box. The smaller square relates to the head of the Ender Dragon and can be looked at as the target's bullseye. The other thing to notice is that the hitbox and the dragon's actual head do not track perfectly with one another. As you can see, the hitbox is generally out in front of the dragon's head. Stepping through my first bed frame by frame, we'll notice that I was late, which resulted in only 22 damage being dealt to the dragon. Since the ideal time to strike the bed to inflict maximum damage is when the small box is directly over the bed, I missed the mark by approximately 10 frames, which is about 170 milliseconds. Backing up, you'll notice there's a slight delay of about 5 frames between when I right-click my mouse and when the bed actually explodes. Obviously, this difference isn't something you'll be able to count out in your head, so practicing and getting a feel for timing is the only way to perfect this. Stepping through my second bed frame by frame, we'll notice my timing was better, but not perfect. This time, I did 47 points of damage. It's hard to tell, but I was slightly late again. We'll see what a perfectly timed bed looks like from this angle in just a minute. The third bed was nearly perfect and dealt 54 damage to the dragon. If I had to guess, I would say I was about 100 milliseconds early. My fourth bed was essentially perfect and dealt 60 damage to the dragon. As you can see, the small hitbox was directly above the bed. I would also argue that my fifth bed was nearly perfect as well, but since the dragon only had 28 health remaining, I'll never know. Before finishing up, I'd like to go over something you're certain to see happen at some point when attempting to one-cycle. Watch what happens here when I'm too late on my first bed, which means the dragon is too low when the bed explodes. The dragon's head begins to switch back and forth on the opposite side. Once this happens, you'll need to make a decision as to whether or not to continue your one-cycle effort. I've found it's very difficult to complete a one-cycle when this happens. Unfortunately, this can happen on your first bed or any bed thereafter. In many cases, during a speed run, this will result in a reset. Well, that's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed this, and I also hope it helps improve your game in some way. I'm looking forward to creating more content like this in the future, and would love to hear any ideas you might have. Thanks again. Bye.